Who would have thought that the most prized algorithm in the world would be accidentally leaked to us via a GitHub repository? And that leak confirmed Google and its engineering team have not only been making false statements to us for a very long time, but that a lot of what we as an SEO community have been showing as theory or research was actually reality all along. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the facts we have so far, what this means for us as SEO professionals as a whole, and a bunch of my own research and insights into the specific ranking attributes that we can learn the most from this leak. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. So what do we actually know so far? Well, this wasn't a direct leak in the sense that somebody internally leaked it out on purpose. It was accidentally distributed via a GitHub repository, and hilariously, it was given a distribution via the Apache 2.0 distribution license, which meant that it was actually given a license to anybody who downloaded it directly off of that hub. So you actually have got a right to do it, and Google has no right to kind of ask for that data back. It's just publicly in the realm now. The data is at maximum 9 months old because it references parts to August last year. There's not actually 14,000 attributes like everybody has been kind of quoting around the SEO community, because not all of them are search related. Only around 7,300 of those attributes are actually search related, and then the other attributes are for the various other Google ecosystem like Maps and YouTube. So as SEO professionals, what does this mean for us as an industry? Well, actually, it reinforces a lot of what we already knew. Like I already said, a lot of the attributes that we are seeing directly correlate with a lot of the research and real-world SERP analysis and data that the community has already been sharing for years and years at this point. And it just reinforces a lot of the findings that we have already found from our own research. It also gives us more insight into what Google is currently targeting to try and demote in its rankings, especially how Google deals with anchor texts and spam, which we'll get on into a little bit later on. And we can also take a look at a lot of these signals as being in production due to comments like this, where it says that this specific attribute is not in production and it won't be populated live. That means that we can kind of take into consideration with a slight pinch of salt that most of the other attributes are actually live and in production on the algorithm. And bear in mind that some attributes do contradict each other, so you just want to make sure that you are kind of in the know against all of these different attributes, and that you are taking into consideration that some attributes may contradict other ones and that they may affect other ones, that they may be more important and have a higher scoring system than others, because we don't currently have access to any sort of scoring data or scoring system in relation to these attributes, which is kind of the real secret sauce behind a lot of this. Though this attribute leak is massively important to the SEO community and just reaffirms a lot of what we have already known for a long time. So one thing I want to talk about before we actually get onto some of these attributes themselves is that actually a lot of the attributes that you're looking at individually might not make all that much sense or could be misinterpreted as something else. But if you look at the surrounding attributes, it makes significantly more sense what that attribute is specifically being used for and what it is already being tied into. One of the benefits that we have from this leak is that it's all modularized, so we can actually go in and see what the reference title is for where that attribute is within a specific module and kind of reference that. So this specific one where I'm referencing here is within the anchor text module. So now we can have a look at the actual attributes themselves. The very first thing we can say, and a pretty obvious one that we all knew for a long time, though Google's engineers themselves said that it didn't exist: site authority, domain authority, and the fact that you have it and you get naturally and organically promoted just because your website has an authoritative link profile. It exists, it's real, we can confirm this one, we can tick it off the box. Something that was a lot more hotly contested was the fact that toxic links were real or not, and if a backlink could actually have a negative effect. It is confirmed that at least in one instance that there is some form of a penalty applied to a bad backlink scenario. And if you look just under that specific attribute, you'll also see that there's a page level penguin penalty, which again is something that I've talked about for a long time, where we have found that penguin, and especially rolling penguin, was a page level penalty. And that's why we would always recommend that when you are building links, that you would build them at supporting content and not at your money pages, because it wouldn't affect the money pages if via internal linking. It would only affect the supporting content because it's a page level link penalty. But this just again reaffirms toxic links are real, and you should probably disavow links. Just as toxic links are real, so are protective pillow links. Pillow links seem to have some level of protection, especially if it says, and I'm quoting here, the doc is protected by goodness, quote unquote, of early anchors. That essentially, to me, says two things: that it is reinforced again by other attributes that talk about trust signals and that you want to have trusted sources, but also that if you are using a lot of those kind of branded and more white hat-esque anchors, especially early on in your campaign, that you can tend to get away with a bit more higher levels of toxicity, higher levels of exact match, higher levels of partial match further on down the line. And that's exactly why we were using these pillar links throughout our SEO campaigns. Another one that was very hotly contested and that had some serious debates throughout the SEO industry's lifespan was the Google Sandbox. And if you actually go and Google Charles Floate, or you YouTube search Charles Floate Sandbox, you'll see that I have videos talking about how to try and at least beat the sandbox. And especially when you are looking at repurposing aged domains or expired domains, you are much more likely to get this kind of sandbox affecting you. So in general, it seems to be towards newer domain names and aka fresh spam, and making sure that it doesn't deliver new websites that could be potentially harmful to users, or harmful in terms of spam, or harmful in terms of hacking and things like that. But in general, the sandbox exists, and it's something that the Google engineers and John Mueller specifically denied repetitively. And again, Google claimed that PageRank was dead, but according to these leaked documents, it seems that actually PageRank, or the old version of PageRank, was deprecated. In replacement was a newer version of PageRank, which took into account this nearest seeds protocol, which, for those that don't know, seed sites are these original websites that Google classifies to start crawling from the search engine. If you imagine, if you're just starting a search engine, you need to put websites into it for it to start crawling, put URLs in for it to start crawling, and Google will put seed sites in there for it to start crawling, and it puts weight on those seed sites. In general, you can think of seed sites like the New York Times, the BBC, and Wikipedia. In general, the more links that you have from those websites, and the closer your links are to those websites, so the more links they have from those websites to your backlinks themselves, the better your links are, the better your quality link profile is. And the more trustworthy it is, the safer it is to rank, etc., etc., etc. Probably one of the most interesting parts of the doc actually was this comment on freshness being a ranking signal that isn't particularly sensitive. I guess that Google does actually classify specific types of signals and specific types of ranking attributes as more sensitive. For example, it denied for the longest time that click data was a ranking signal, and we will get onto that in a little sec, but the DOJ trial kind of forced Google's hand into admitting that click data was a thing. It seems here again that freshness is a thing, but it's not a particularly sensitive thing. And there's definitely been a couple comments from Google engineers over the years that freshness has been taken into account, and that it will specifically help boost around kind of current events or any kind of trending topics. Another one that I've been screaming from the rooftops for years, but trust signals are real, and that they can definitely help protect your website and kind of future-proof it against potential demotions or other kind of spam capabilities that Google is looking at trying to target sites out there with. This one specifically is referencing anchor texts more so than general kind of trusted links. But in general, you can see at the bottom there, it says total number of trusted sources for this URL. So in general, you can see that trust signals are a massive part of how Google looks at dealing with spam. And especially if you have a new website, or especially if you're in YMYL niches, you're wanting to be taking advantage of these kind of trust signals as much as possible. And by all means, it looks like Google just wants you to build as many of them as possible, which is what I've been saying around entity stacking for a while now. And like I said earlier, Google definitely uses click data. It definitely uses Chrome data. It's a pretty obvious sign that Google kind of created the world's biggest browser. And if they weren't to use that data, especially the fact that they are allowed to use that data, it wouldn't really make much sense. Yes, their engineers and their kind of PR team, their comms team have been denying it for a very long time, but to a lot of people it was pretty obvious, and it was one of the main reasons why CTR manipulation was such a problem for a very long time, and it's kind of still a problem when it comes to native SEO even to today. However, in general, what we can see from this is that Google has got a lot of different factors when it comes into this specific case, and that some countries are prioritized over others. Some clicks are inherently bad, some clicks are inherently good, and it kind of takes into consideration as well the last longest clicks, which was the number of clicks that were last and longest in related user queries, aka how many times the user actually lasted on your page versus other pages. And it does seem to take into consideration some sort of correlative effect as well. So clicks data definitely seems to be a big part of the algorithm, and like I said earlier, the DOJ case did expose that. We just didn't know to kind of what sort of an extent, but NavBoost, which is the system that does take into consideration this click and Chrome data, definitely seems to be one of the biggest systems inside of this leak. So we do actually see that Google definitely does censor content as well. It does seem to be the case that it might be more current situation related, so things to do with elections, things to do with COVID, but there also does seem to be some sort of a universal whitelist, just allowing websites by default to be entered into every kind of query and making sure that they aren't pruned out of those queries by mistake. However, I'm not sure how legal this fully is, because Google as a search engine is supposed to be independent, though they are supposed to have some kind of level of cleanup when it comes to anti-illegal content, but I'm not sure how much necessarily things like COVID and election misinformation is actually illegal. And that might actually be a bit of a grey area when it comes to Google's ability to actually censor its search engine like it's doing in this specific case. So a few people have been calling this one the Neil Patel score, or the copycat score is its actual name. But it seems to be the case that Google is actively trying to de-rank duplicate content, de-rank kind of syndicated content. And it would make sense. However, there is still link conversion to take into consideration, where actually it doesn't necessarily matter who was the first person to publish the content and who is the copycat. It's more so who has the strongest link authority, especially at a page level, and that tends to take over from this score, especially from our own testing. However, it's pretty interesting to know that duplicate content definitely does get deranked at some level. You can also see that UGC Signals got absolutely turbocharged, and there seems to even be a comment around it being times 1000 and flawed. You know, you can interpret what that means by yourself. However, my own interpretation kind of leads me to think that there is some flawed nature in their UGC page quality signals, and that they have increased it and turbocharged it to the absolute moon, and that would show on why a lot of these SERPs have been taken over by the likes of Reddit and Core, and why Reddit itself has seen upwards of a 600 to maybe I think 800% increase in organic traffic over the last year. One of the parts that was very, very interesting to me as well, which again kind of reinforces my entity stacking protocol for every new website and every website in general that's trying to rank in Google, is this document that shows how Google actually builds document, or the NLP SAFT entity document. It shows all of the various attributes around how Google is correlating an entity, including things like gender, mentions, profile, references, and representative mentions and salience, so the scoring of how relative it is to the entity score as well, and all sorts of additional attributes as well. But it's been quite common knowledge now for a long time that Google has been trying to build the world's biggest entity base, and that will help power the AI future that Google is trying to build, and it will be one of the biggest resources that Google has at its disposal, and that I think it has definitely achieved it so far with the algorithm. But it's just interesting to see the specific types of features and attributes that Google is looking for when it's building the entity, so it helps us further reinforce how we are approaching building entities in Google search. And then finally, I want to take a look at how Google itself looks at anchor text, because we got some really, really interesting information about how Google treats anchor text, and that anchor text is actually one of the most important parts of SEO and your link building and your link profile, and that you want to make sure that you are following these rules as much as possible. And that does mean anchor text in relation to both link building and internal linking. But the very first one I want to talk about is this creation date. And actually, further on down the line, you'll see deletion date, and there's another one that's called fresh date as well. And that basically is showing us that Google is tracking anchor text changes, and that it is actively looking at anchor text changes for spam signals. So that's one of the things that I was saying previously, is that you don't want to actively try and change a lot of the anchor text that you've already built, especially if you're doing that in bulk, because that can be an active spam signal and an active negative signal in and of itself. Then you also have this is local one, which again just indicates whether the source is an internal link or an external link. Then context is very, very interesting, and there's actually two more other attributes in the documentation that talk about text to the left and text to the right, which further reinforced that context narrative, or the surrounding context of the anchor text. And we've always talked about how important that is, and how important you can actually channel some of the partial and exact match anchor text through the surrounding text, rather than making the anchor text itself a partial or exact match anchor. And then finally, it says the dropped homepage and dropped local anchor text count, which is very interesting because it actually tells us that Google is actively dropping or removing a lot of internal anchors and internal keyword signals when you're doing internal linking, which would make sense, especially at the homepage, because it doesn't necessarily want the homepage to rank for specific keyword signals, because most of the time you want to rank the homepage for branded searches and branded queries alone. So where do we go from here then? Well, first of all, this is likely just the beginning. We've only had a few days, maybe just about a week now, to actually go through this document. Most people are still using AI to analyze a lot of the documents, and I'm going to link in the description down below to a blog post from Christopher in my team, who will show you how to use LLMs to actually analyze this leak for you, and how you can use tools to do it for you. You don't have to use kind of these pre-made tools from the SEO industry. You can just use ChatGPT. But again, we don't have any direct scoring systems, so that means that we can't really attribute any direct scores or importance to specific queries or specific attributes, and we need to make sure that we're taking everything with a bit more of a pinch of salt, but we can try to infer the scoring system, and we can take the testing data and the experiments and the years and years of research that we've done as an SEO community, and just reaffirm that using these attributes. But we don't want to let this leak give you confirmation bias. So we want to make sure that we're testing to confirm all of our hypotheses, all of our theories. We want to make sure that we are confirming everything via testing, and that we're data backed, and that we're not just relying on opinion because it's not fact, and that we need to make sure that we're confirming everything through testing and through the SERPs. And bear in mind that Google have been eerily quiet, and it's very, very possible that a major update could come round the corner purely to use attributes that aren't in these documentation, and make the SEO community scramble to go through the testing phase and research phase all over again. And it could be like, going back to 2005 or the Panda and Penguin days all over again, trying to figure out what Google has changed, what Google has targeted. Great fun for us, not so much fun for most of the people who rely on Google as a search engine and as a traffic source. So I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you have any additional insights into this leak, drop them in the comments down below. Make sure you like this video. You can follow me on X for more daily SEO insights. It's at Charles_SEO. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Charles Floate. And if you want any of my free and premium training, you can go to charlesfloatetraining.com, including that AI LLM blog post on how to analyze this leak for you. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.